You know the big stories about Moses, right? The plagues, parting the Red Sea, the whole shebang. But if you ever stop to think about what was really going on in his head during those earth-shattering moments, we're going to dive into that. The fear, the doubt, the sheer human struggle behind the legend, all inspired by a piece from Teresa Kay's blog. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? We see Moses as this larger-than-life figure, one of the greatest leaders ever. But what makes his story so powerful, so relatable, is that he was just human. He wrestled with the same stuff we all do. And by digging into his humanity, we might just uncover some truths for our own lives.
All right, so our first question takes us right back to the beginning, that incredible, world-changing moment, the encounter at the burning bush. Okay, just try to put yourself there for a second. You see a bush that's on fire, but it's not actually burning up. And then, out of nowhere, a voice, God's voice, calls your name. So the big question is, were you just frozen solid with fear? Or were you completely overwhelmed by how holy and sacred that moment was? I mean, it's got to be both, right? Divine, but also incredibly confusing. And you know what's so amazing about this? What's so comforting? Even after this unbelievable, direct encounter with God, Moses still doubted. He hesitated. And that tells us something so important. Our own doubts don't mean we're out of the game. God doesn't wait for us to be perfect. He calls us right in the middle of all our fears.
So that brings us to our next big question, and this one is about maybe the most famous miracle ever. You guessed it, the parting of the Red Sea.
Seriously, let's try to imagine this. You are completely trapped. Pharaoh's entire army is barreling down on you from behind, and in front of you is this massive, impossible sea. And then the waters just part. What would that even feel like? The sound, that deafening roar of the sea, the mist hitting your face, walking on dry land with these giant walls of water held up on either side of you. The sensory overload would have been just, wow, unbelievable. And this moment totally changes how we think about faith, right? It shows us that faith isn't about never having doubts, not at all. Faith is taking that step forward, putting one foot in front of the other, even while that little voice of doubt is still whispering in your ear. It's all about trusting God to make a way when it seems absolutely impossible. But having great faith doesn't mean you're perfect. Far from it. And that leads us to our third question, which is all about a moment of very human failure. Now, this story it's a tough one to swallow. God's instruction was simple. Speak to the rock, and water will come out for the thirsty Israelites. But you have to remember, Moses had been leading these complaining people for years. He was just plain exhausted, fed up. And in a moment of frustration and anger, he didn't speak to the rock. He struck it. Just one act of disobedience, but the consequence was huge. He wasn't allowed to enter the promised land. But here's the incredible part. Even though Moses messed up, even though he disobeyed, water still flowed from that rock. What does that tell us? It shows that even when our actions have real consequences, God's grace is still there. His provision is still present. It means that even in our absolute biggest mistakes, God's purpose can and will move forward. Okay, our fourth question. This one's for anybody out there who has ever felt like they just weren't good enough. Let's go back to that burning bush for a second. When God first called him, Moses was basically the king of excuses. He was like, who am I to do this? I can't speak well. You've definitely got the wrong person for the job. Please just send someone else. I mean, does any of that sound familiar to you? It's a classic case of imposter syndrome, long before we even had a name for it. And the lesson here is so powerful. It's this. God doesn't call the people who are already equipped. He equips the people he calls. It proves that your ability is way less important than your availability. The takeaway is massive. You do not need to measure up. You just need to show up. So this all leads to our final question. After everything, what's the ultimate takeaway from a life like Moses's? Well, it might just boil down to 3 simple words. Trust, obey, walk. Trust God, especially when you don't understand what's happening. Obey where he's leading you, and just keep walking forward. You know, when you step back and look at the whole picture of Moses's life, you see this beautiful golden thread running through it all. It's a pattern. God consistently chooses the people we would probably overlook. He calls the person who's afraid from a burning bush. He leads the person full of doubt through an impossible sea. And he loves and uses the person who messes up, the one who is fallible, even after they strike the rock. Moses' life is proof positive that God calls ordinary, imperfect people to do absolutely extraordinary things. So what does this all mean for you? What's the takeaway? Well, maybe it's a challenge. Maybe it's your turn to walk, to go outside, to seek God in your own life. And hey, don't be afraid of your own burning questions. Lean into them, embrace them. And above all, trust that the very same God who spoke to a hesitant shepherd from a bush is speaking today, and he's ready to meet you exactly where you are.
This whole exploration was sparked by a post called My 5 Burning Questions for Moses from Teresa Kay's blog, Sunshine and Faith Evermore. It's just such a powerful reminder that behind every big legend, there's a real human story, and it's always worth exploring.